Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you. I'm sorry that I don't get to see you like live and have great interactions with you, but I'm really, really thankful for you. And I happen to be this morning um, at the Appalachian College Association. So uh, hopefully I'm having a blast and hopefully your day is going well. Just two things as we get started today. One, I just want to say how exceptionally proud I am of you because getting to the stage where you're at takes a lot of hard work. Now, granted, it's like, three steps up and then you see the mountain ahead of you with finishing your undergraduate degree, going on to medical school, all the complications of medical school, your boards, and then successfully getting out there and do your career. But I'm really impressed and proud of you because you've made these steps already. And as you faithfully make these steps, each step is getting you closer to your dream. And even as you're in this process of stepping, you are helping other people. So I hope out of our little time together today that we can raise some questions a little bit about a life calling and particularly about who you are. Because so often when we think about uh, life calling, it's pretty much like, this is who I am and this is my career. And now my career has become my identity. And I would really, really like to see it as a lot more broad than that. So I want to shape this time together with centering around kind of three words: listening, appreciating, and then serving. So let's move forward. When you think of the term calling, what comes to your mind? So take a moment as you are all diligent students, as you're taking a few notes today, pull out your phone uh, and write down for me. What comes to your mind when you think of calling? And we know that calling can come from a variety of things. Oftentimes I think it's like a collection of stuff all merging together, kind of like what you see in the image here. It comes from life experiences, what's been going on in your life already. The things that you absolutely love, the things that make you talk fast, the stuff that you are watching on YouTube that no one else is watching. Also, learning about what you dislike, what you hate, what bothers you, uh, things that make you feel alive. This is the stuff that you are interested in that maybe other people are like, man, I can't believe you're doing this. Think about some of you going into a lab, right? When other students are trying to leave early or wanting to fall asleep, and here you are, you're asking more questions or want to do other things. Also, kind of thinking about when you think about life calling, currently, what's your life circumstances? Oftentimes, God speaks to us through the situations of our lives, right? And then ultimately, another thing that kind of goes into that great blender of our lives to kind of create our life calling is the people around us who are the supportive people, the people whose opinions matter, the people who truly know us. What do they tell us? What do they think about you? So when you get quiet and you talk to people that you love or love you, whether it's that really important teacher you had, that coach, one of your parents, a grandparent, person who helped raise you, supportive religious leader, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, what do they say about you? When they can be fully honest, right? You may say like, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to be an anesthesiologist or I'm going to be a dermatologist. This is exactly what I'm going to do. My question would be, what do the other people around you affirm? Because so often we can have a little clarity about our life call through the people around us. But I have to admit, my bias in the room, my perspective is influenced by a great Christian thinker. His name is Frederick Buechner. He just died a couple months ago. And Frederick Buechner, he made this kind of beautiful line about calling. And he said this: to discover or create the place of God's call, the place where God calls you, is the intersection between your deepest gladness and the world's deep hunger. So, where are you most alive and filled with joy? And then it intersects with where's the world's need? What is the world hungry for? And at that intersection is your life call. Now, I have already put a theistic God language to calling. I am convinced that calling comes from outside of us, that calling comes from our Creator who is wooing us and calling us. And God may call us through our emotions, our life circumstances, all those other things that I have mentioned. But I do believe that God is the one who calls us. Others who do this work think differently. Some people believe that you actually don't find it or discover it, that you will create it, that you are the author of creating your call. And with that, because you create it, it can also change. I think about the great thinker, writer, just ultimate awesome humanitarian, Holocaust survivor, Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. So I know it feels kind of gendered language there, but he wrote the book in 1952, and it was some things he was thinking about before the Holocaust. And then he was taken in the concentration camp, and Dr. Frankl kind of worked with his theory throughout his time at the concentration camp. And when he came out, he completed it. And what the idea is that we make meaning if we're going to live with any kind of reality, any kind of substance. We take our life circumstance and we make meaning out of it, right? So we embrace what life has dealt us, and then we create the meaning, right? We find meaning in it. So a person like Dr. Frankl could be in Auschwitz at the concentration camp or Birkenau, and he could make meaning there. And he believed that was one of the reasons, that luck and fate and all that were a concoction of what helped him to get through. Now, as we move forward, there's a myth that I want to shatter. And the myth is this, that somehow your life and your life calling will be a straight line. You wake up one morning, sky opens up, says, hey, I want you to be, a rural family medicine doctor. And at 15, you hear that call and you study hard in your sciences in high school, go to the University of Pikeville, get an OMSP. You study really well, you get into medical school, you graduate from KYCOM, you start a residency, and you become a family care doc. And there it is. Actually, for almost all of us, that's not how it works, actually. The call or the pursuit of our call is oftentimes not a straight line or to this clear sense of destination. But for many of us, it's a windy journey of seeking out in the moment, what is the call that you have for me in this moment or in this season of my life, based on who I want to be? What are my values, my guiding ethical principles, and my desires? When I die at the end of my life, what do I want to be said to be true about me in my life? These things guide us as we search out the kind of the call in the moment. So rather than the straight line, now for some of us that may be the case, but for the most of us, it's actually much more broad and open and a lot more windy than what some people realize. Now, I want to ground us in a little bit of scholarship, and there is an essay written by some leaders at Pepperdine University. Pepperdine's out there in California, and an essay that they use with their first year students, or at least they used to use for their first year students. And I found it to be so helpful. And it's this idea of vocation. Vocation is kind of a term that's kind of out of use now, but it really means calling, right? And typically we think about a person's vocation, we can think about Catholic language of a person in the vocation of holy orders, or like being a priest or nun. But I want to think about it a lot more broadly. I want to think about it in the idea that all of us have callings in our lives. So when we examine your quest for your calling, one of the first things we ask is, what are your eulogy or funeral virtues? Author and contemporary American scholar David Brooks, he frames it this way. He says, what's on your moral bucket list? we know what a bucket list is, right? It's like all the things you want to do before you die. So, travel to Israel, or learn to play the flute, or play the lottery, or whatever it is that you want to do, right? Go to the Super Bowl. We know a bucket list, but David Brooks argues that we in our lives have a quest of meaning and quest for meaning. And one of the ways that we can help discover and make that meaning in our lives is to have a moral bucket list, things that I want to grow into. So I want to be a deeply honest person, or I want to be committed to live in profound empathy. So I put this on my moral bucket list, and I strive to do that. How am I becoming more honest? How am I becoming more generous and empathetic in my life? Other people have referred to this as kind of funeral or eulogy virtues. So think about yourself for a second. Hard truth, so we can just kind of share lovingly with each other. I am going to die. Hopefully not today, and I hope not tomorrow. But at 42, I have the realization of my life that I'm not immortal. Maybe I'll be blessed to live as long as Queen Elizabeth and get to 96, but probably not. The average life expectancy in Pike County is 69 years old. So I'm going to die. And when I die, what do I want to be true about my life? One step further, you're going to die. Again, I hope not today. I hope not tomorrow. But you will die. One of the things that I do to help remind me of that is I literally carry this skull on my desk. It reminds me of this truth. Now, some of you might think it's creepy, but what do you want to be true about you? Let's move past the shallow. Let's move past the insincere. What do you want to be the real part of who you are? Now, one of the things that we have to kind of work on is that we want to make sure that we don't misunderstand this, that we don't want to equate our calling to our career. Now, some people are called to be a healer, right? Called to be a healer, and you express that through being a doctor in a very long time, and that's wonderful. But being called to be a healer is even greater, or it's larger than being a doctor. Because what happens if you medical school doesn't work out for you? What do you do if you're in a car accident and you can no longer, work as a doctor? How can you be a healer, right? So your calling is mostly larger than your career. Very few people historically have had the chance to have their career match their calling. A lot of people have just had to work to survive over the years. But we're in a kind of a unique space in the history of the world where people have enough finances and money to be able to do the things that they feel most called to. I'm a living example of it. I feel like God has called me to help people on a spiritual journey, a journey of compassion and mercy, and I literally get paid to do that, which is unbelievable, right? And you hopefully are on that path also of being able to match your career with some of your calling. But typical questions we typically ask people are, what are you studying in college? What kind of job you want to get out of college? Typically, you go home for Thanksgiving this year, people are going to go, what are you studying? What do you want to do? If I meet you on the bridge and you say, I'm a biomedical science major, I'm saying, hey, you going to go to med school? But really, those are secondary or third tier questions. The real question of our life is, who will I become? Who do I want to become? Because if the goal is to be a doctor, dang, how many years is that from now? That's legitimate. 4, 5, probably 6, 7 years from now. I don't want to just simply think that my life only starts 7 years from now. I want to think about right now. Who do I want to become now? Who do I want to become in the shaping of this process while I'm going through organic, while I'm going through, molecular, I'm going through genetics, and I'm going through, all immunology and all these classes, right? Who do I want to become in this process? I would argue that one of the things that can really help shape your life and help you understand life calling is to see yourself as an instrument or an agent of repair. that you are somebody who has been called to be a healer of the world, to be a repairer of the broken. Now, does that mean that I have such a negative view of the world? No, actually, I think the world is an incredibly beautiful and complex and mysterious and awesome place. And I'm so thankful I get to live in this beautiful world. But I also know that the world is broken. Kids die of cancer. There's famine and war and plague and addiction. It's very painful to live in our world. And you and I have a call to be a healer or a repairer of the broken in some aspect of the world. Let's go back to the example of being a rural family med doc or a rural family doc, right? You go into a community that maybe doesn't have adequate healthcare, and you see how healthcare complications are impacting families. Diabetes that's not being treated properly or managed because people aren't going to the doctor or don't have access to it. So grandma or dad who have diabetes are now limited. Their blood sugar and stuff is skyrocketing, infections, they lose an ankle, they lose a foot, they lose an arm, they lose a leg. Their life is greatly impacted, and their family's life is impacted because the disease is complicating things. You as the rural family doc come in, provide adequate, supportive, helpful, over-the-top, great healthcare. You literally change the course of that family because you're changing the course of that patient, right? So you see that as your way that you're healing the world. So ask yourself some questions. What's your purpose for living? Why do you literally wake up in the morning? Now you might say, oh, I have to, or my mom makes me, or if I, don't wake up, I'll fail school. But why go to school? You say, well, I want to get a good job. And my question is, why get a good job? Why make money? Let's kind of go to the core. What really drives you? What's really your purpose? Also, a question is, what makes you most happy? Or let me say that differently. Let me throw out the happy word. What makes you so filled with joy? Where are you most glad? Also, what are your gifts? Where are you gifted? Now, for some of you who have poor self-esteem, or you really struggle with self-hatred, that gift question is hard, right? So maybe you can't answer that for yourself, but where have other people said that you're gifted? And if you say, well, Rob, people don't say that I'm gifted. People say that I'm this and that, and I'm not any good. Cut those people out of your life because they're wrong. You are gifted, right? Where are your passions? Where's your current place in life? And the last question I would ask you is, who are your mentors? Right now, who are the people that are mentoring you? Could be a professor, could be a teacher, a coach, an adult, a parent. But who do you look to and you say, now that's the kind of person I want to be? Make sure you hear me very clearly. I didn't say you see the person, you say, that's the career I want. You're the doctor. I want to be the doctor. No, I'm asking you about who in your life is creating an example for you of who you want to become, and then who is helping you become that. Because the truth is, all of us should have a mentor, somebody who is developing us, supporting us, coaching us, encouraging us, and a little bit ahead of us, right? And then we are supposed to do that same for other people. Who are we mentoring? Who are you mentoring right now? Now, I've spent a lot of time already, probably to the point that you're like, come on, Rob, pick a new topic. But I've been talking a lot about character formation. That's the development of who you are as a person, your ethics, your values, your heart. Really, we're talking about the heart. Of course, the preacher is going to talk about the heart. But who do you want to become? And as we think about that, we can start with asking the question, where do you need to grow? Growing edge for me, right? I need to have more focus in my life. Sometimes I am so scattered because I want to do this and that and this and that, that oftentimes I'm actually missing the most important things in my life. So one of the growing edges for me is I need to grow in more focus. And also I need to become more disciplined. I need to learn that I can say no to things because I'm saying yes to something else. So as you think about who you want to become, ask yourself, where do you need to grow? So right now, in your notes, ask the question, where do you need to grow? Just go ahead and put that down on your list real quick. I'm going to put it down for me. Okay, next, what needs to happen in your life that will take hard work and take stretching? I'm not talking about you're waiting for God to like open your brain up and deposit all the answers for your hard classes. What needs to happen in your life that you work really hard to become the thing that you want, or to become the person that you want, to achieve the things that you want? I guess really ultimately I'm asking, in your character, as you examine yourself, how willing are you to work at what you want? Now, it turns out we know that character truly, truly matters, because you know it in your gut. You hate a hypocrite. I know it. I've listened to enough college students to know that hypocrites really matter. And when you think someone is being a hypocrite, you literally leave. This is one of the crises of the church, right? As a man who wears the collar, I know there have been some moments in my life that I've been a pretty big hypocrite, and it has caused people to walk away, step out, roll their eyes, no part of it, right? Because what people are saying is, when they kind of be repulsed by a hypocrite, what they're really saying is that character matters. I want people who are honest and trustworthy and hardworking and loyal and good, these things, right? So your character matters more than your career. Let me say that again. Your character matters more than your career. Think about that for a while. I would challenge you in this talk today to test that out. Is that really true? Do you believe that? Would you push against me if we were doing this live and you were able to pause and kind of be able to have these great conversations? Would you push me on that? Would you say that career is actually more important than character? My question would be, why? What makes you say that? As we continue to go on, let me give you some tools. I told you that we'd frame this talk around listening. I've been asking for you to think about listening to your life, listening to the inner of your hearts. And what I'm asking you to do is to simply pay attention, right? Pay attention to you, pay attention to your circumstances. And the only way we can really do that is to get quiet, literally. Shut off the AirPods, turn off YouTube, quiet down the text messages, the apps that are going off, and turn the TV off and get quiet. But not only the external noises that I've mentioned, but also the inner noises. If you're like me, you have a lot of noise that goes on inside of you. The noise of anxiety, the noise of self-doubt, the noise of negative emotions, imaging that we've heard from other people, the fears about tomorrow, concerns about our own inadequacies. And I'm asking you to kind of begin just a little bit, begin to quiet that a little bit, and to ask yourself what really matters. Now, we do that through trying to avoid multitasking. Now, I suspect that a lot of you right now, as I'm talking, you're working on some other assignment, you're texting somebody, you're watching Netflix. Heck, some of you could be on Zoom and kind of walking through the cap. I don't know. But we love to multitask. But actually, multitasking is very painful and it's very distracting, because what it does is it robs you from yourself. It robs you from being present in the moment. So let me give you a tool. It's called the Examine. This Examine practice is over 500 years old. It was brought to us by a man by the name of Ignatius of Loyola, a Spaniard. Ignatius of Loyola. He's a Catholic saint. And Ignatius of Loyola had a practice where he would review his day, and he reviewed his day in the presence of God. And it became more of an attitude as opposed to a method where he would reflect. Now, it didn't take long, 10 minutes or so in the evening. And what you do is, the first thing you do when you think about the exam is you get quiet, right? You carve out a space, a place, a time, and you simply just take 10 minutes, maybe right before you go to bed, and you quiet yourself, doing all the things we've talked about. And then you ask God to look at your day through God's eyes. You could start with, help me, God, to see the day as you've seen it. And then you give thanks. You give thanks for the joys, the blessings, the love that you have had today. So for me, I give thanks for your hard work, your dedication, just a commitment of who you are. And then we can review our day. That's when we go through, what was my morning like? What was my lunchtime like? What was my evening like? What was my study sessions like? And I'm asking the Holy Spirit to guide me. Would you point out to me things that stand out to me on this day? And then what I do is after I examine my day, I explore the places where I have fallen short. Maybe I was too rude to my study mates. I was actually snippy to the person working the front desk when I came through the caf today. When I woke up this morning, I was judging all kinds of people in my first class. Or I lied to my parents when I texted them today. We look at these shortcomings when we examine, what's going on? Why did this happen today? What made me do these actions? And then finally, as we wrap that up, we look to tomorrow and we say, okay, tomorrow I've got this meeting with this professor, I've got this class, I've got to go to work study, I've got to go to practice. And we invite God into every one of these moments. We invite God into our shortcomings. We invite God into our day that's going to happen. We invite God into all of this. And this then begins to develop inside of us a reflective spirit. This is one tool to examine. So if you look at it now, or you can look at it online, pull up the examine, and there's a pathway of 5. So another thing I want to give you is a tool called the Enneagram. Many of you might like personality tests. On Facebook, you can find out which Hogwarts house you're in, what kind of sandwich you are. Those are funny, but they're actually pretty hokey and most times wrong, actually. But I want to give you an ancient personality test called the Enneagram. It works on archetypes, and this ancient system has been used across cultures, both East and West, and seems to transcend other cultural factors like education, economics, language. And the Enneagram is based around 9 types of people, nine archetypes, ranging from the idealist to the mediator. Now, you can go on Truity, that you see on the top right there, or at least the right for me, top right corner of our slide, and look up Truity Enneagram, and it'll give you a free test. And then it'll point you to where you're most dominant in. And I would encourage you to explore the Enneagram. There's a depth of insight to the Enneagram that's mind-blowing, because not only does it tell you about your type, right, but it also gives you a wing. So let's say, for me, I'm a type 2. I'm a classic type 2 helper, functioner. I'm a type 2 with the 3 wing. Okay, so the 2-3 is where I'm at. But the interesting thing about the type 2 is when I am not healthy, the Enneagram also explores what does it look like when I'm burned out or stressed out. So this wonderful, giving, compassionate heart that I have as a type 2 can become a trickster and a manipulator and a kind of a hurt person when I'm not doing well. So I may help you, but I'm actually trying to manipulate you, right? I'm trying to manipulate you so that you love me. So we find out the Enneagram shows us both our personality types, but also how we do relationships, what work environments might be best for us, Also, what does it look like when I'm functioning my best? And also, what does it look like when I'm not so healthy? A ton of people are writing about it. People have been thinking about the Enneagram for a very long time. So I would encourage you, if you have any kind of interest in self-discovery, that you would dive in and look at the Enneagram. Now, when we think about things like the Enneagram, we got to think about knowing our life story. And we do that by looking back reflectively on different aspects of our life. So the picture on your right is yours truly. That picture was taken in 2007. I was sitting in Chennai, India, at the University of Madras with a couple of my classmates, and we were studying Hinduism, particularly the study of the god Shiva. And when I look at my life there in that moment, one of the things that really stands out to me was at that moment in India, I was also a Christian missionary there to help build churches and encourage pastors and share the love of Jesus with people. But I was so alive in the classroom when I was learning and sharing with my colleagues. I legitimately went to class every day and took notes and read the books and went over the top. And it's interesting now that my life is playing out as a chaplain educator, right? Pastoral educator. It's always been a part of my story. I've always loved school. I've always loved learning. So it makes sense that as I'm a pastor in the educational setting, right? Because that's where I've been most alive, where I'm most interested, where I lean in, get most excited. So think about your own life. Look at these different moments. If you were to pull up a snapshot of your own life, sure, you're not pulling up the one of 2007 in India, but what snapshot are you pulling up? What tells you right now that you're kind of going in the right direction? Is there a little picture of you when you're like 4, you're dressed up like Doc McStuffins? Is there a picture when you're 7 and you're trying to like provide first aid to a kid who fell on the playground? Is there a picture of you at 12 when you're with a microscope in class and all the other students have left, but you want to see that slide one more time? You tell me, right? What snapshot comes to your mind? Now, as we continue to explore ourselves, let me ask you a few more reflective questions. I would really encourage you to write these questions down and to give it some thought. Now, I know you have 10,000 things, and this is not a exam worthy. You're not being tested on. This is not going to get you a grade. This is not going to help your MCAT score, at least not yet. But this will help you become a more reflective you. So let's ask the questions. Okay, first question. Why don't I do more of the things that I love? Let me ask it again. Why don't I do more of the things that I love? When I think about it for me, I love being with my children. I have a great time with them. But sometimes I find myself adding work to my life. Even when work is over, I find other things to do. Like, why? Why am I not actually investing in the things that I actually have said that matter to me the most, that bring me the most joy? What limits you? What obstacles are there? And really the question is, am I actually putting the obstacles in front of me? Next question. If I could do anything, if money wasn't an issue, right? What would I do? Would I really still study science and medicine and try to be a doctor? Or would I be an artist, a musician, a dancer, painter, a history teacher, a bio teacher? Would I be a stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad? Just stay at home. Would I be a world traveler? What would you do if you could do anything? Now, again, real talk. Let's think about the voices in our head and the voices in our life that have been negative. So, for example, I might say, I've never been a good athlete. I've always been terrible at athletics, which is, kind of true. My question is, where does that negative critic come from? And more than that, when those things are said inside my head, oh, Rob, you're terrible. You suck at sports. You're not an athlete. And because you're not an athlete, you're not really like an ideal man. when I'm wrestling with that, whose voice is that? Now, I'm not thinking that you're like hearing multiple voices, but where did I pick that up? Whose voice does that sound like? Does it sound like a demanding sister? A parent that fills us with shame? A bitter, mean teacher? Where does that come from? Now, as we think about, listening with our life and being reflective, we also think about service, serving other people. And what I'm arguing is that we have to begin to develop a social conscience. We are in a moral crisis in our country and our world because we think we are somehow, independent from one another. I don't mean like as a country, but I mean as I have no responsibility for you and you have no responsibility for me. And that's just nonsense, right? Because we are connected as one human family. We are literally interconnected. If you don't believe me, think about the crisis of COVID. One person doesn't wear a mask, half the room gets COVID, 2 people die. Right? We're all interconnected. And we have, I'm going to argue that we have a moral obligation, a moral responsibility to speak up and particularly defend and advocate and be a voice for people who don't have the same privilege, rights, or space that we do. I have to speak up for the vulnerable. If some person is being denied or some group of people are being denied, then doggone it, I need to speak up. Think about Eastern Kentucky. Right? There are some people who are not getting the same treatment, the same rights. They're being discriminated against because of particular practices. And a guy like me who has a collar, I can stand up and say, but wait a minute. What about this? What about that? I'm going to argue that we actually should have a preference. We should have a preference for the poor, people who are resource lacking, who are hurting, or being denied. We should always move toward the poor first. And also, in a world of injustice, in a world of inequalities, inaction is not possible. Inaction is not an option. We have to be people of action. So when you become a doctor, I don't think you become a doctor for yourself. I don't think you become a doctor for your 401k. I don't think you become a doctor for your yacht. I don't think you become a doctor to fly around the world whenever you want and however you want. I think you become a doctor because, darn it, the world needs healing, and you're going to have space, place, and resources to help people, to really make a difference. People hurting, and you have an opportunity to make a huge difference. It's going to take hard work. But in a world of injustice, a doctor has a lot of power. You can help heal things. The last pope we had, Pope is like the leader of the Catholic Church. Our current Pope, Pope Francis. The previous Pope, the Pope that retired, his name is Benedict. Pope Benedict said this: to love someone is to desire that person's good and to take effective steps to secure it. Besides the good of the individual, there is the good that is linked to living in a society. It's called the common good. It's the good of all of us. We are made up of individuals, families, and intermediate groups who work together to make a good society. To desire the common good and strive toward it is actually the requirements of justice and love, justice and charity. Work toward the common good, the betterment of society. Now, interestingly enough, people talk about how they want to be happy with life. I think that's, well, I'll save my label for it, but I think actually the pursuit of happy life is actually will result in a miserable life. So you pursue happiness, in the end, you'll actually end up miserable. If you pursue meaning and go after a meaningful life, you will have a life well lived. Seeking a happy life is simply just trying to get whatever you want. Focusing on pleasure, you're the kind of taker rather than the giver. You want things that are pleasant, right? And but this doesn't actually work out because pleasure seeking at some points leads to toothaches, cavities, broken marriages, and falling off a cliff, right? But meaning, however, is when you look inside yourself, you know your values, your ethic, and you express it in the world with people who are in need, a society that needs healing. And you have this integration, your ethics and your values merge together with your actions, and it becomes this formative bond of making who you are. And you look yourself in the mirror and you say, like, I am thankful for who I am. I am proud of who I am. I have nothing to be ashamed of. When you're seeking out meaning, you're the one who gives rather than takes. You take all of your life, your past, present, your future, even your painful issues, and you're working out meaning in those things. Now, meaning does not mean that you're going to be abundantly happy. Working out meaning, thinking about Dr. Viktor Frankl, we talked about earlier, being in the concentration camp wasn't happiness. But at the end of Dr. Frankl's life, he could rest assured that he had lived with such vibrant meaning that he had no regrets. Wouldn't you like a life with no regrets? So I told you about Viktor Frankl. I just want to highlight a couple things he said. He said, our greatest freedom is the freedom to choose our attitude. What Dr. Frankl is saying here is that we don't have control over our circumstances. So when he is captured and thrown into the Holocaust or the concentration camp, he didn't have a choice in that, right? That was something that happened to him. But what his choice was, how would he respond with his attitude? Right now, you may be sitting in this Zoom, and this is the last thing on earth you want to do is listen to me. You can choose to be angry about it. You can choose to be distracted about it. You can choose to be bitter about it. You can choose to, write to the president and say, this is stupid. You can choose to put a cuss word on my door. You can choose all kinds of things. Or you can choose to say, like, I'm going to be here. I have to be here. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to mine something from this presentation and include it in my life and become more reflective because I want to be a better human being. Frankl argues that you have the choice, the full 100% freedom to choose your attitude. Let me push one thing. How many times have you said, or you've heard me say, this person makes me so mad. This makes me so sad. I'm so happy because of this. Frankl would challenge all of that language. And Frankl would say that when that person in the parking garage who was parked too close to me then backed out and flipped me off, they didn't make me mad. I chose to be mad. Because I could have laughed. I could have totally had fun with it. Like, hey, you're number 1 too, buddy. Ha ha. Instead, I chose to get really mad. I'm like, who does he think he is? How dare he? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, half my day, I'm like super mad and cranked up. You're free to choose your attitude, says Frankl. He comes up with the idea of logotherapy, meaning you have the will to make meaning. Okay? You have the capacity to change yourself. Right? You must make. And Frankl argues that suffering, way down at the bottom of the slide, it says suffering is a part of life. It's a part of, as much as death is a part of life, so is suffering. And suffering is a necessary part of the human experience. We make meaning in our suffering. So I would encourage you to think more about this idea. Right now, what do you do with the freedom that you have to choose your attitude? And then finally, I'm going to wrap this up, is this idea of taking risks. You've taken a huge risk coming to the University of Pikeville, signing up for all these hard classes, taking on a sport, taking on other things like choir, band, whatever it is that you're doing, working. You're taking huge risks. But are there other risks you're unwilling to take? And what inhibits your risk? So, for example, let's say I'm in this talk and I realize that I'm doing the OMSP thing, but you know what? I don't want to be a doctor. Like my dad wanted me to be a doctor, my grandma wanted me to be a doctor, or I thought it was going to make me a lot of money. But I've realized after taking Gen Chem and organic that like I don't want to be a doctor. What inhibits me, blocks me from wanting to take that risk to say, turns out I actually want to be a history teacher, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a business person, right? But so often what inhibits us is that we are so afraid to fail. And where that fear of failure comes is two things, I think. One is the myth of perfection. Somehow we think that people who are successful are always just perfect, which is like not historically accurate whatsoever. But also, I think we're afraid to fail because we somehow feel like that if we fail, that we are inherently a failure. Huge difference. You know, I tried to shoot this basketball and make the three-pointer and I airballed it. That was a failure. I am not a failure. You know, I started a diet to lose 15 pounds and gain 7 instead. That diet was a failure. I'm not a failure. I sought to have a lifelong successful marriage. I ended up getting divorced. That marriage was a failure, but I'm not a failure. See the difference? This kind of mindset will help us to take more risks. So if you're interested, some great resources, highly recommend. The one of this list that I love so much is The Choice by Dr. Edith Eva Eger, Holocaust survivor, fun lady, unbelievable. She's super, in her 80s, she was doing presentations and doing high kicks. She's awesome. A Christian book called Let Your Life Speak by a Quaker named Parker Palmer. That's actually free on our EBSCO host. A book I absolutely love, written by a psychiatrist, a Catholic psychiatrist, called A Sacred Voice is Calling You. It talks to you about social conscience. And then finally, just a real heartfelt tug you at your heartstrings, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, right? With the end in mind, how can we shape our lives? So I leave you with this prayer by the great monk Thomas Merton, who lived in Louisville, Kentucky. He says, I have no idea where I'm going. I don't see the road ahead of me, but I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, actually please you. I know that you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always. You are ever with me, and you will not leave me to face my perils alone. Man, I wished I were with you in person, but I'm really thankful for you. If I can do anything for you, my office is in Armington 460. My number is 419-560-6381. You can email me at robertmusick@upike.edu or holler at me on Twitter at Chaplain Rob. Either way, just get a hold of me. I would love to talk to you more and learn more about your life story. Or you want to push on some of this stuff and think, hey, Rob, I think you're full of hot air. Let's talk about it, okay? Have a great day, guys. Really appreciate you.